Another question that can never be answered by the cholesterol hypothesis is, why does atherosclerosis and atherosclerotic plaques, why do they never develop in veins? Because the cholesterol level is exactly the same, the endothelium is exactly the same. So why isn't it being absorbed into vein walls? Why is it only artery walls? Now, there is no answer to that question. The only answer to that question is that clearly that's not what's happening. What is happening is that where you have blood vessels that are under the greatest or the highest blood pressure, if you like, it's not just blood pressure. So you say, why does it mostly happen in the arteries in the heart? Why is that the commonest place for atherosclerotic plaques to develop? Why there? Well, the answer is that the pressure, obviously the heart contracts every second approximately. And as it contracts, it squeezes flat the coronary arteries, which is the name of the arteries in the heart, such that blood flows in the heart only at the point where the heart relaxes. So the opposite way around from the rest of the body. Because at that point, the arteries open the heart, open up, the blood can flow, then the heart contracts, then they're slammed shut. So actually blood flow in the heart is the anti-blood flow. But you can imagine someone described the coronary artery is a bit like someone, when it contracts, it's a bit like someone stamping on a garden hose every second. So these arteries are under terrific, what you call biomechanical stress all the time, all day, every day. And therefore the endothelium within them is also getting slammed and bashed all the time. So it's not, if something is damaging to the endothelium, then within the heart it's going to be doubly damaging. And the other place where you can really get most often get plaques is in the arteries in the neck, the carotid arteries. Well, of course, the blood comes straight out of the heart, hits the aortic arch, goes through 180 degrees and then heads down the rest of your body. So at this point, you've got terrific turbulence and enormously high pressure going up into your neck. So when you look at it, where do plaques happen? Well, they happen in areas of greatest stress, if you like. And that would make sense because that's the area where the endothelium's under the greatest pressure and stress. And in the book, I sort of liken arteries to sort of whitewater rapids, where the water is tumbling down and rocks are getting turned over by the force of it. Whereas the veins, you're looking at sort of the delta valleys, where it's moving slowly and sluggishly, and there's not a lot of stress going on here. When the blood pressure in the veins is around about 6 millimeters of mercury on average, the blood pressure in the arteries is about 120 millimeters of mercury. They just measure it in this terrifically arcane way. So you've got to say it's clearly got something to do with that, because if you take a vein from the leg, which has no atherosclerosis in it, and then put it into the heart and use it as a coronary artery bypass graft, within about 7 to 10 years, it will have severe atherosclerosis in it. So what has changed in this blood vessel? Well, everything is the same. The cholesterol level is the same, and the level of everything is the same, except you put it into a different part of the body, which is at a higher blood pressure under higher stress. And in that situation, that is when atherosclerosis develops. So we have the answers. They're like staring you in the face. There are conditions where you have a hole in the heart, particularly in the ventricles, and so the blood pressure that is coming out of the left-hand side of the heart that's supposed to go up the aorta goes back into the lungs at high blood pressure. This is called Eisenmenger's syndrome, but you don't need to know that. And people who have Eisenmenger's syndrome also have a very high rate of atherosclerotic plaque formation in their lungs. And you do not get atherosclerotic plaques in your lungs unless you have raised blood pressure in your lungs. So it's like, guys, this is like, it's staring you in the face. That it is to do with biomechanical damage to the endothelium. Once you've damaged the endothelium, there's a terrifically powerful message sent that the artery is damaged and you must form a blood clot here, right now, on this point. And that's what happens. Because the moment you strip endothelium off, you reveal an enzyme called tissue factor. And tissue factor sits there, and it's like the red, it's just a sudden alarm. It says blood clot here now. because the body thinks the artery's been damaged. And if you damage an artery, you can bleed to death in whatever, a very short amount of time. So damage to arteries cannot be allowed to happen. Blood pressure, blood clot, bang, blood clot forms. If it's not big enough to block the artery, and mostly it isn't, the blood clot has to stop very quickly. But then you have a blood clot stuck to your artery, and it can't be allowed to break off and go down and through the rest of your body, because it'll just get stuck somewhere else, causing damage downstream. So you can't have the same situation as, if you scratch your hand, you get a blood clot forms, and then you get a scab, and the scab falls off. Well, inside an artery, if the scab forms and the scab falls off, it's going to cause mayhem. So it can't fall off. So the only thing the body can do with it is to cover it over with a new layer of endothelium, and then basically it's incorporated into the artery wall itself. Now, of course, most of the time after this has happened, the body comes along and clears it away. But if you get a repeated episodes of blood clot formation at the same point, the plaque will gradually grow. And again, you can read papers in journals like Atherosclerosis, where they've looked at people who've got atherosclerotic plaques in their arteries, and then they've done angiograms on them over yearly for however long. And what they've found is that those plaques do not gradually increase in size. They don't just gradually get bigger and bigger as cholesterol molecules all sort of fill into that area. No, what happens is they suddenly grow. Bang. They grow all of a sudden. And then they stop. And then they might grow all of a sudden again. So what's the only possibility that could be happening is that another blood clot formed at that point. It was covered over. It was covered over with endothelium, but it then grew because there was more clot left stuck in the same area. And there's plenty of journals, there's hundreds of journals that agree that this is what is happening, and yet they still will not agree that atherosclerosis is to do with blood clots forming one on top of another. And if you look at a lot of plaques, and you slice them open, they've got layers, layer after layer after layer after layer after layer, like tree rings. They don't all look like this, but about 40% do. And the explanation, and if you read the explanation, it's, well, obviously what's happened here is we've had repeated blood clots have happened at the same point and have gradually grown over years, but not gradually. It's happened bang, gap, bang, gap, bang. And this is all widely accepted. Obviously I can't quote references. I'm not going to show you references here, but you can look this stuff up. So none of this is remotely controversial. And yet, still, we have this stuck to, well, it's cholesterol that starts it off. So, well, how does it do that? They can't explain it. They can't explain it because it doesn't. Because there is no way. We don't have cholesterol in our bloodstream. We have lipoproteins, and the one that we're blamed for everything is LDL. And they say, well, the LDL molecules must somehow or other leak through past the endothelium, well, at one point and nowhere else. So how does that happen? Oh, well, it just does. Well, how does that happen? Well, it does. No, it doesn't happen because it can't happen. And even if it could happen, it doesn't make any sense.